Children are back to class for the new year, but just how confident are you in their school's safety measures? We're going to be speaking to a security expert about the 4 questions every parent should be asking. With school back in full swing, keeping your child safe is a priority that both parents and administrators are concerned about. Michael Haggard, an attorney for several Parkland mass shooting victims, is joining us now with key questions that should be asked in keeping your students safe.
Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. Well, the first thing I think about when I hear about these mass shootings at schools is you think that the response from other schools around the country are going to put in metal detectors. They're going to beef up their plans, and some of them do, but we still don't see the kind of security that I think some people think that they need for their kids to be safe at school.
No question about it. You know, it's really the epidemic of our time, and you would think after all the tragedies we've had that schools would make this their #1 priority. And schools are busy. They're educating our kids. There's so many events, but a plan needs to be placed at every single school.
And you have 4 specific security questions that you think every parent should be asking administrators. What's number 1?
Well, the first thing is, how do people get on campus? Because, we talked about metal detectors, searches at schools, so you can have an inside threat, but really what we've seen is the outside threat, the disgruntled student, something like that. So points of entry, how do you gain access to that campus? And is it guarded, making sure that someone is controlling access to that campus at all times?
All right, let's talk about the second point here, because the drop-off and pickup location is such a busy spot for parents. It is a source of frustration for us as we're trying to maneuver in, but we need to be thinking about other things, right?
Sure. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's what shooters are looking for, is numbers. And so when you have drop-off, you have the most numbers, the most vulnerable. You have people coming from outside campus. Right. So it's got to be restricted. Those school monitors, those people should really be trained, who gets on. Are there decals on the cars to get on that somebody would have? And those types of things, and really be aware of that. And parents should understand so they don't get frustrated that this is for your student's safety. That's why we do this.
Okay, and red flag laws. Explain what those are and how every school should have something along those lines.
Sure. Illinois just passed theirs January this year after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and what it is really trying to understand. Most of these former students, these folks, have had mental health issues, and the problem is when you combine that with access to guns, you have a tragedy. So every parent should be involved in that process. We don't want witch hunts, but if you can identify children and people that are having those problems and identify them, and Chicago now allows that. Not only can law enforcement identify them, but people in the household can, and teachers and school administrators can, and you go to the next step of understanding about guns and access to that. We think about Columbine, and if they had that back then, what they could have done.
How do you identify them?
Oh, it's tough.
It's easier said than done, isn't it?
It is. And you talk about, there's been programs such as No One Eats Alone. The kid who is sitting there alone all the time. And there's programs around this country where they talk to the school quarterback. Go make friends with those kids. Let's try to have that community, because that's who gets lost. Absolutely. Absolutely. They're the ones who get lost. And if you look and you study this horrible issue, that's what you see, is those types of kids who are really just thrown to the back, and what's their response?
Yeah.
And it's not easy,
in the city of Chicago, we have one of the most Big Brother camera networks, and there's so much invested in technology. I would think that schools should be investing in technology. What kind of things are you seeing out there that they should be implementing?
Well, surveillance nowadays is #1. You can see who does come on your campus, what kid is in that hallway that shouldn't be. And usually, be thinking about when we went to high school, and maybe they're doing something not that bad, but that's what you've got to identify. On every one of our cell phones, we could put 16 cameras up immediately. Somebody should be looking at those cameras. And I hate to say it, but for a response from law enforcement, nowadays we have gunshot detection technology. The minute one gunshot goes off, if law enforcement is immediately responded to, you can save lives. Maybe not all, but certainly like a mass casualty like Parkland.
Thank you so much for joining us again to go over these for parents. The 4 questions he's saying you should ask: is there always a single point of entry at my kid's school? Ask about drop-off, pickup safety measures, the red flag laws that are in place, and what security technology tools is the school using that my child's school didn't have last year. Great questions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It all does cost money to do all of this, but man, our kids' lives are just priceless, and you can't put a price tag on that. Really can't.
No question.
All right, thank you.
Thanks again.